Hello everyone, Luciano Oliveira, Oliveira Lawyers. Today's Wednesday, April 15, 12:33 Rio de Janeiro time. We are starting one more live stream, and as usual, if you're here with us, I want to hear from you topics of your interest about Brazil and Portugal for us to discuss live. If I don't have any topics, then I'm gonna get something from our backlog to discuss, and we're gonna start by taking a look at the news. Let's take a look at news in Brazil and see what's going on. All right, so this is Estadão. Estadão is one of the top three newspapers in the country. Very interesting. Estadão's distribution is not only in São Paulo. Estadão is originally from São Paulo, but you can find Estadão in most capitals of Brazil as well. And naturally, nowadays, of course, most people are gonna read Estadão online, and that's what we see right now. The main headline is about the so-called bets, and by bets you can probably tell this is like casino games that were never authorized before. Like Brazil has a very consistent history of not allowing casinos, bets, and any type of games other than the official lottery games from the state. And nowadays, like they're flexibilizing. And here the headline is talking about a musician who's like working with a bet company, and it looks like they have a connection to organized crime rings, right? I guess not surprisingly, like this type of activity many times is going to have a link with organized crime. So the news here is that this musician was arrested, and it says that he's also like the leader of this crime ring, if you will. So that's the main headline, and then there are some, sub headlines expanding on the bets. And I remember the first time I heard about this bet thing in Brazil, it was around Fortaleza. I was discussing with like a housekeeper, and the housekeeper was saying, that everybody was betting their salaries on the tigrinho, right? Tigrinho is the Portuguese word for, I don't know, like a little tiger, and little tiger or tigrinho, it was one of the first bet systems, or first casino online games, and they do target, I guess, like less literated. I'm not sure if that's a term, but they usually target the more how can I say, people who have less studies, and who are unable to have like I don't know, like a stronger mindset against wasting your money on games. And they do target, unfortunately, those more fragile parts of the Brazilian population. It's something very sad, right? But that's the whole thing about the bets. There is another headline here saying the end of the 6x1. 6x1 in Brazil means that people are going to work 6 days a week, and then they're going to rest 1 day a week. Actually, the standard is not really like 6 days of work. It's more like 5 days and a half. Okay, so let's say if you are a doorman in a building, for instance, typically the HOA is going to require you to work like from Monday to Friday, and then typically on Saturday, like a few hours, more like 4 hours in the morning of a Saturday. So that's the standard today, and the work. Relationship between employees and employers in Brazil is very strict, is fully regulated by a legal framework that was originated in Brazil in the 30s, like last century. So it's about to become, I don't know, like 100 years old type of framework. Is very, outdated in my opinion. And here the idea is that employers, they have a very preset number of obligations, and that's going to be the same thing for the employees. And you cannot typically depart from those presets. If you do depart, you're going to be in trouble. Okay, so if the employee doesn't follow those presets, then the employer has an opportunity to fire that employee. And if the employer doesn't follow, even if the employee agrees with whatever the employer is doing, then the employee down the line, they can come and sue the employer for, damages, unpaid wages, and whatnot. And here the idea is that, there is a trend, and naturally this trend, I think it's aligned, right? Many things we have in the labor framework in Brazil, they're not good, they're outdated, but this one, I think it's actually pretty reasonable. And the idea here is that employees, they're going to be required to work only 5 days a week, right? So instead of having 1 day and a half for resting, now they're going to have 2 days at the office, right? And this is I don't want to say that we're doing better than we should, because we actually follow the 5 days a week rule, because most of the service providers in our space, they're going to naturally work just 5 days a week. Okay, but I think here the bottom line, the distinction, if you think, well, it's not that different from the United States or, Europe or other countries, that's not the case. The bottom line here is that, the state in Brazil is going to super regulate those things, meaning that you cannot deviate unless you are a large firm. And then if you are a large company, then you can, get a deal done with a syndicate of employees, and through that deal, you can have, small deviations of the standard. But here, what is most striking to people from other countries is how super regulated those things are. They're regulated by the seconds, by the by how much time you have for lunch, at what time you're going to have your lunch time. It's really a different ball game, if you will. Okay, so that's the end of the 6x1, meaning that now people are going to have 2 days to rest, and I guess that's a good thing, right? And what else we have? We have other topics. We have, naturally, we have the United States here in terms of the blockade of the Strait by Iran, and a relationship with China. There is also here, you see, President Lula is gonna, try his 4th term as a president in Brazil, and he's gonna dispute with Flávio Bolsonaro, who's the son of former President Jair Bolsonaro, who is under arrest, right? For a coup attempt. And very interesting, right? The justice who sent President Jair Bolsonaro to jail, he is the target for an impeachment by the Brazilian Congress. There are many evidences of this justice's family really getting getting enriched by payments from Banco Master, which is a bank that went bankrupt. It's really entangled in a bunch of corruption cases. So now Congress is after this justice, and President Lula, right? That's another topic here of interest, in Brazil. And President Lula now, it's kind of distanciating himself from this justice, and this justice is basically the one who articulated everything that was necessary to actually release President Lula from jail, right? For those of you who don't know, President Lula went to jail for corruption charges corruption charges that were upheld in every single a level of the Brazilian judicial system other than the Supreme Court, right? So this justice articulated to have President Lula, free of jail, and now President Lula is basically saying, you know what, man, I don't want to have anything to do with this justice. So it's calling a lot of attention, right? Like, I mean, it does call attention the fact that President Lula is not like backing up this justice now that he is under fire from the Congress, right? So that's another major topic of discussion in Brazil, all right? But enough with news. Let's talk about Remax. Remax Nomad States. That's the real estate agency in Brazil. They are based in Leblon, Rio de Janeiro, but they operate across Brazil. They have helped, and they are helping many of our clients in Florianópolis, Fortaleza, Rio de Janeiro, a bunch of clients in São Paulo, naturally, right? So if you are considering buying property in the future, take note of their contact information, and there you are. Let's see what else we have. Let's take a look at our friends and see if we have any participation so far. Let's take a look. Oh, we have a Tora. Boa tarde, Senhor Oliveira. Boa tarde, Tora. Good to see you over here. We have OK Ponco, Tigrinho. This is a new word I just learned. Yes, tigrinho. Tigrinho is like for us, like, a tiny tiger, right? And I think it's very playful, right? The concept of a tiny tiger. And the tiny tiger is the name for this, a very controversial, to say the least, a betting game in Brazil. I mean, I'm just like, really frustrated that the government would allow those folks to target, the most exposed parts of our population, okay? Like they also target retirees, and retirees, they are gonna, spend their, monthly, retirement income on those games. I mean, it's just sad. Like, I wish Brazil would continue its tradition of basically, a blanket prohibition of casino games. Tora, if I'm doing the retirement visa process in the US, what is the progression of steps? Do I make an appointment with the Brazilian consulate after obtaining all the needed documents? Tora, not always, okay, not always. And the consulates, the Brazilian consulates in the US, they do change this standard often. So the progression of steps is typically to have the full package. And then if you use in our team services, for instance, they are going to file an application with the consulate, right? This could be done sometimes through a system that is called the e-consular, okay? And other times the consulate says, instead of using the e-consular, you're just going to send me like the full package. I'm going to review the full package, and then I'm going to either approve your application or ask you for an interview, right? The interview is always possible. It's never granted that you're going to get a visa without an interview. But many consulates, they, first take a look at your application and then decide if they are going to schedule an interview or not. All right, Tora, so it's not guaranteed that you're going to have an interview. For many of our clients, they end up getting the visa without an interview. All right, General Principal. Boa tarde, Senhor Oliveira. Boa tarde, General Principal. Thank you for enlightening us about employment laws in Brazil. I keep seeing a term, 13th month pay. Are you familiar with this? Is this like a bonus or a mandatory overtime? Yes, that's a good question, General Principal. So the 13th month is like, employers, they need to pay a 13th salary by Christmas, right? So typically we need to pay, I don't recall the timeline. I know we need to pay in 2 different installments. So you're gonna pay an additional salary to the Brazilian employee. You're gonna pay half. I think it's like at the beginning of December, and then the second half, you must have it paid, I guess, around like the 15th of December, or maybe starts in November. I don't recall the rules, but I know that every single year, around November, December, we need to plan ourselves to pay an additional salary to employees, right? Like, I mean, if it was mandatory overtime, that would be favorable to the employer. Typically in Brazil, the framework is going to be favorable to the employee, which I like, by the way, things that are favorable to the employee. That's basically what we try to do here at the firm. The problem is not everyone can afford those things. So when I was sharing about the headline that you guys saw, the 6x1 on newspaper Estadão, there was another mention over there, like there was a gentleman from the Association of Restaurants saying, listen, we are unable to accommodate the 5x1, meaning that if the 5x1 is enforced, we either gonna fire, part of the employees, or we gonna need to charge more to the public. So, whenever you have like a business like us, like we are a law firm, and pretty much every law firm in Brazil would be in a good position to follow the mandatory benefits. But listen, if you're dealing with another segment, maybe you are unable. So it's very common in Brazil, and that's why we always hammer that, right? Like when people come and say, "Well, I'm gonna buy a business, I'm gonna invest in a business, you get like the permanent residency." We shy away from those, applicants, because we just think it's a horrible idea. If you're going to start a restaurant, if you're going to start, another regular business, the chances that you're going to get burned as an employer is just too high, right? We don't want to be in this boat when disaster happens, right? But again, fortunately for a law firm, yes, we can, pretty much pay everything. And the 13th salary, this additional salary, is just one of the many things that you need to take care in Brazil. There are two other things, and I'm just going to share, General Principal, because you asked about, typically when employers, they are trying to calculate the cost of employment, they are going to say, listen, if I'm going to pay X salary to this folk, I'm actually going to have 2X as a cost, right? And then you kind of wonder if it would be a better idea to just pay 2X's to the employee instead of paying 1X, and then playing with the second X in terms of paying the government, of paying a 13th salary, paying the increased salary for the vacation time, and very interesting as well, because I know how it works in the United States. In the United States, typically you have, I don't know, you could have 10 to 15 personal days a year. Correct me if I'm wrong, folks, because that's the information I have in my head. And listen, if you're gonna take a vacation, this is gonna be it. Like, you're gonna use those personal days. And by the way, if you happen to get sick, you also gonna use your personal days, right? So in Brazil, believe it or not, let's say you're starting a new job today. You're starting a new job today, April the 15th. Guess what? For this current year, right? I mean, not like the calendar year, but your year starting on April 15, you're going to have 30 days, 30 days of vacation time. And the firm is not only going to pay you for those 30 days, but it's going to pay you an increased salary, because guess what? You need to travel and have fun, right? So that's how it works in Brazil, which is, very different from how things work in the United States, for instance, right? So just sharing a few curiosities, general principle, about how things work in terms of employment in Brazil. But listen, again, from my perspective, I do like all of those things that I think that really improve an employee's, quality of life. My biggest problem with the Brazilian framework is like our cultural tradition of employees who are fired to sue the employers to take a second bite at the apple, right? And listen, if the employer did something that was wrong, according to the Brazilian framework, by all means they should pay. But unfortunately, there is a tradition of employees faking claims to take advantage of their former employers. And that's my biggest problem with the Brazilian framework, right? There was a proposal for employees who would, fabricate claims to, guess what? At least pay the employer's attorney who the employer hired to defend them from a bogus lawsuit. And unfortunately, this provision was struck down by the labor courts, right? Guess what? It looks like they would not understand that as reasonable. So pretty much employees have the opportunity to fabricate claims and see if it sticks. If it sticks, guess what? You get money. If it doesn't, no problem, right? So that's it. Let's see what else we have. Alexander, not a question, but was very happy to see that Gol now has direct flights from Galeão to JFK in New York. Before, Delta and American only had seasonal flights. That's good information, Alexander. That's new to me as well. All right, so gig. Alexander is saying gig to JFK. JFK, everybody knows JFK is in New York City. And gig is the international airport of Rio de Janeiro, right? And in Rio de Janeiro, there are two main airports. One is going to be gig, which stands for Galeão. And the second one is going to be SDU, which stands for Santos Dumont. Another very interesting fact, in Rio de Janeiro, the Brazilian Federal Police Station in charge of issuing the RNM cards and doing other procedures related to immigration, they are based in Santos Dumont. All right, there is also a Brazilian Federal Police in Galeão, or GIG, but guess what? They are not really in charge of handling those procedures. They are actually handling other occurrences, right? They are doing inspection of luggage. They are, enforcing the laws. They are arresting people who are taking drugs, to the airplane. So this is going to be the Brazilian Federal Police at Galeão, the international airport. The Brazilian Federal Police in Santos Dumont, of course, they also have those same types of activities, but they are also in charge of handling many things such as the RNM card and other procedures in Rio de Janeiro. Alexander, does Brazil tax incomes from pensions or social security from the USA? Yes, Alexander, there is no freebie in Brazil. Brazil is going to charge every single type of income that you have and some, all right? So there is no exception, because I know there are some types of exceptions in the United States. You get a break, and Brazil says, well, not my problem, right? Like if you have an income, guess what? You need to pay some taxes in Brazil. Now, Alexander, there were some changes. They were, I think, enacted in 2023 for the year of 2024, and now they are being applied to the 2025 year as you speak. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm trying to say these are relatively new laws, but I think there is a standard 15% bracket that's going to be applicable to the retirement income. Okay, so listen, it's not zero, but it's not 30%, right? Like it's 15. I think it is a reasonable compromise that the Brazilian government is enforcing here. There is also, Alexander, there is also a reciprocity approach between, I say an approach, reciprocity approach, because it's not really a treaty, but it's a reciprocity between the United States and Brazil, in which when you pay federal taxes, right, not any type of tax, federal taxes in the U.S., you can typically use that as a credit to your tax liability in Brazil. That works really well for people who are in a high tax bracket in the United States, because guess what? Like if you are in a high tax bracket, then you can basically use a lot of this credit to offset your liability in Brazil, and maybe just have to pay very little in Brazil. Now, if you are one of those folks who are maximizing your deductions, and there are some approaches in which you use real estate in the U.S. To bring your taxation closer to zero, then you are out of luck, because all of those things, like, they are not going to help you in Brazil. And then in Brazil, there is a very good chance that you could be bumped to the 27.5%, which is the highest bracket nowadays in Brazil. All right, Ellen Richardson. Boa tarde, Senhor Oliveira. Boa tarde, Ellen. I am moving to Brazil in June under retirement residency. How will I know how to pay my taxes based on the taxes paid in the U.S.? Does your firm help with filing taxes? Yes, and we do help actually many retirees. But we, as of today, we have a limited capacity. Like, we are working to develop a full department here at the firm in charge of taxation. I think this is going to be ready in 2027, right? The idea is that, or our goal, right? Like, sharing firsthand with you guys, our idea is to start advertising that probably in November of 2026, November, December, and then getting a list of new clients for the next tax season in 2027 on the 2026 income, right? And yes, I mean, this is a need that so many foreign citizens have. And unfortunately, most of the CPAs in Brazil, like, they are not knowledgeable enough about those things. Not uncommon for people to have consultations with us, and they've been all over the place in terms of filings. Sometimes they are fined. Sometimes they get bad advisory, and then they change CPA, and they have completely different recommendations. So it's a whole mess. And in Brazil, that's not just like in Brazil, in the United States, you also have this change often, right? Like, you have a new president, you have a new administration, you have new rules, like they change substantially, like the tax return law. And in Brazil, not different, okay? In Brazil, not different. So it's difficult for a provider to stay on top of all of those changes unless they have a dedicated staff. So as of today, we have two people here at the firm, like who handle those tax filings for a limited number of clients, and I would say our capacity is kind of fully taken. But for 2027, the idea would be to expand the number of clients being served. Because then we can, continue our mission of developing a one-stop firm for the needs of foreign citizens in Brazil. All right, we have Aaron. Good to see you, Aaron. There are exceptions for Canadians. The accountant the firm referred me to helped me claim treaty immunity. Yes, Aaron, that's a good point. So Brazil does have a bunch of treaties, right, Aaron? So there are, two approaches that can help you tax-wise. One is going to be, like we said, there is the reciprocity approach. So let's say if the United States gives a treatment to Brazil in terms of accepting federal taxes as a credit. Brazil is going to do the same thing in exchange. But there is something even better, which are the treaties. And the treaties, you either have it or you don't. And Brazil has treaties with different countries. And that's another reason why we need, to develop our internal accounting team, because basically you need to have knowledge on a bunch of different countries, right? It's not just the United States. Nowadays, we basically handle clients from the United States with kind of, straightforward strings of income. Now, if you have, more complex situations, if you have, for instance, a trust, if you have, a bunch of different strings of income, typically we're not gonna serve you, and then we're gonna share, a couple. And when you are a client, right, we're gonna share a couple of professionals we're familiar with, and then you can work with them. They are more dedicated to just like the tax side of things. They're typically on the more expensive side, though. Like we're trying to get something for 2027 that's gonna be more reasonable, particularly for people from the US. Like in the US, it's very interesting, right? Like, I mean, you're not gonna pay more than $1,000 to a CPA if you're using one of those services online, right? Like there is, I think there is, I forgot the name of I think Age Block or something like this. There is another major one, which I think is related to QuickBooks. Like you're not gonna pay maybe $500, right? But in Brazil, if you're gonna come with a situation and then this Brazilian CPA is really knowledgeable, they're not gonna do your filing for less than $1,000, right? So we're trying to get something cheaper than that, and that could work for most people. That's our plan. Let's see if we are gonna achieve that or not. Brazil Vibes, good to see you, Brazil Vibes. I'm looking for an apartment in Florianópolis, Brazil. I may need an English-speaking realtor to help with the 5-day vistoria and the rental agreement. Does Remax offer that service in Florianópolis? Brazil Vibes, whenever you're dealing with a realtor, right, like they are either in the transaction or not, right? So it could be Remax, it could be someone else. If you take your business to them and say, listen, here is my business, right? You're my realtor, right? Kind of similar to how it works in the United States. They're going to get a commission on your transaction. And in this case, naturally, they are going to help you with, different things. Now, if you have someone else handling those things, then nobody is going to help you with that, right? So my recommendation here is for you to find a realtor who's going to not only help with the things that you need, but is going to represent you in the transaction as well, Brazil Vibe. So it's not clear to me, like if you're going to have everything in the single shop or not. But let's say if you're using someone else for the transaction, they're not just going to come and handle those things on a piecemeal basis, right? Like those things, they are typically high friction. And again, sometimes they're going to handle the high friction thing if they can get the juicy part of the deal. Now, if someone is taking care of the juicy part of the deal, nobody else want to touch the high friction stuff. Okay, Brazil Vibes, but by all means, discuss, explain your goals, and see if they can help or not. Tora, does your firm help with setting up the process of sending the required amount to a Brazilian bank account needed for the retirement visa, and when do the transfers begin? Tora, so you don't need to send the money ahead of time, right? Brazil, and there are, there are some countries like Portugal, for instance, right? We handle like something similar to the retirement visa for Portugal. For Portugal, it's called D7. And for the D7, guess what? You do need to send the money ahead of time, not Brazil. So in Brazil, you're going to get your visa/residency based on your capacity to send your retirement income. and you're not required to send that ahead of time. Okay. Now we have a service to help you set up a non-resident bank account that would make easier for you to send the money. This is not part of the retirement visa residency, right? Like again, the visa is a visa, residency is a residency, it's not a bank account. But we also have a service in which we can assist you with opening a non-resident bank account. And by the way, right, like one of the banks we work with, they are available for account opening online. They are Banco Rendimento, and those of you who are knowledgeable about the expat journey, Banco Rendimento is very famous, right? Like Banco Rendimento is not like a minor player. Banco Rendimento is one of the main players in this segment. My only concern is that, Tora, like if you try to do it by yourself, you never know if you're dealing with the right entity or not, right? Particularly if you're not very knowledgeable about computers, accessing stuff. If that's your case, I don't know if it is your case or not, but if that's your case, I would recommend you to use our service to open a bank account, and then you're gonna get the bank account open with the right bank at least, and then you can send the monies through this non-resident bank account. You can send the monies ahead of time, so when you are in Brazil, you already have money available for your, like everyday necessities. All right, Tora. But Banco Rendimento is one of the go-to banks we work with here at the firm. Alan, Senhor Oliveira, I recently secured my RNM thanks to your amazing team in Rio in February. Do I have to be in Brazil to receive the actual physical card? Good to know, Alan. Good to know. Alan is a client. And Alan, you don't need to be in Brazil to receive the physical card. You could do it through a power of attorney, right? Now, the power of attorney is somewhat convoluted, right? And typically when you're gonna need that, ideally you would let us know ahead of time, because let's say if you are in Rio de Janeiro, then it's easier for you to get this power of attorney done. Now, let's say if you are outside of Brazil, if you are in the States or elsewhere, then in this case, it's difficult for you to get a power of attorney done, and then I would recommend you to basically, visit Brazil just for the sake of getting the card. When you don't get the card, after a while, they may charge you fines, right? So it's not ideal for you to delay much, Alan. And, getting the card is a pretty big deal. It's your resident card, right? So my recommendation is, like, if you are outside of Brazil, if you don't have a power of attorney in place, that you basically just visit Brazil for the sake of getting the card. Since, if there is no power of attorney, we are unable to go and pick up the card on your behalf, Alan. But very good to know Alan is a client, a satisfied client. Thank you for sharing, Alan. All right, Brazil Vibes. Thank you, Brazil Vibes. Brazil Vibes is buying me coffee. I appreciate it. Thank you for the generosity, Brazil Vibes. Nelson de Carvalho, Part 1. Hi, Dr. Oliveira. What is your advice for a person from the CPLP trying to get the Brazilian residency with the goal to get the passport in about a year and a half? Nelson, my first advice is for you to work with a better timeline. We don't like those timelines, Nelson. Let me, like, I'm just going to talk, I'm not going to even talk about the CPLP, all right? I'm just going to talk about the naturalization application. So let's say once you meet all the requirements, right, you can file for the naturalization, and this naturalization process is not uncommon for it to take more than a year, and you are supposed to be living in the country. Okay, the naturalization is not a process for people who are living abroad. The naturalization is a process for people who are living in Brazil. And guess what? Who want to still live in Brazil? Okay, so all of those rushed approaches, right, to get a Brazilian nationality in 1 year, 1 year and a half, they are a no-go, right? Like, I mean, it's just like, too much of a long shot, Nelson. Part two, would that be easier to get the residency by starting a business or buy real estate, or do you have a better idea? Nelson, so let's talk, just like to give you an idea about the timelines in general. So for the CPLP, in theory, like when you go through the regulation, it should be like 2 years of temporary residency, and then this would move you to the permanent residency. However, there is also an interpretation that people from Portuguese nationalities, they should get permanent residency right off the bat. So there are both interpretations, and we have some clients who are going to get the 2 years. They're happy. There are other clients who are luckier, and then they are going to get the permanent residency right off the bat. For those who are, like trying to expedite the process, in theory, you could use, there is a constitutional provision in Brazil saying that in a single year of residency in Brazil, nationals of a Portuguese language country, they should have access to naturalization. But I can tell you, like, if you just apply the Brazilian immigration through the executive branch, they're going to deny your application. And then, the work around that, people talk about in the market, and that's not something we recommend. It's like you can file a constitutional challenge saying, well, if the Constitution says 1 year, why would you want me to wait for 3 years, right? So that's an option you have. Just like anything that is judicial, there is no guarantee that you're going to get it at the end of this journey, okay? And the firms that are going to be selling, those, I don't know, schemes, if you will, I guess, they're making money out of it, and they don't care if you're going to get it or not, right? So here at the firm, we kind of play more conservative. We don't want to sell you something that, may end up with nothing. Or, of course, like in immigration, nothing is guaranteed, but our approach here is that we don't like long shot stuff. If it is long shot, guess what? We're not going to do it for you. We want to work with things that are going to have a high degree of chance, because then we do our job, and you most probably get what you want. Now, for long shot stuff, then it's the opposite. Like, we can do as much work as we do. Chances are you're not going to get it. Chances are you're going to be pissed at the end of this process because we took your money and you didn't get what you wanted. So we are more conservative on this route, Nelson. But aside of the CPLP, when you go with the real estate investment route, typically 4 years of temporary residency. After those 4 years, then you have new 4 years of temporary residency. So you're going to be able to file for naturalization in theory, and if nothing changes, in 8 years. Now, if you're investing in a business, something that we try not to do here at the firm, we try not to support people doing that here at the firm, then guess what? Typically, you're going to get the permanent residency right off the bat. Okay, and so you would just need like 4 years of permanent residency to apply for the naturalization. Nelson. Tora, obrigado, Sr. Oliveira, for the information about Banco Rendimento. Can I have help from your firm with setting this account up at this time? Yes, of course, Tora. Yes, you can certainly have our help. Okay, and we can certainly assist with that. And I understand you may want to have money in Brazil sooner than later. There is a lot of talk, Tora, about currency exchange rates, about the U.S. dollar losing value, about a collapse of the U.S. economy. My personal take is more like in line with Warren Buffett. He says, don't bet against the United States. That would be my mantra. Okay, but I also hear what clients think in terms of hedging themselves against like a situation that would complicate their plans. So we do have clients who want to send money SAP to Brazil. Even Banco Rendimento, like they offer you like a type of financial account that is going to get you part of those really high interest rates that you see in Brazil. Again, here, I'm kind of, more conservative in terms of how to interpret those interest rates. I think it was Thomas Friedman who said there is no free lunch ever, right? There is no free lunch ever. So if you get a huge interest rate in Brazil, guess what? There is a very strong reason for that. And the strong reason is that, every now and then there's going to be something happening to a developing economy that is going to wipe out any of your gains and potentially impact the value of your original investment. So that's the whole reasoning why Brazil would pay such a high interest rate, is that there is a huge risk, or there is a high risk, particular to the Brazilian economy compared to the United States, for instance. And that's why, Brazil needs to offer such a high interest rate for people to bring money from the U.S. to Brazil. All right, Tora. But again, for money for your, daily needs, or for your, for your enjoyment of Brazil, I think it makes total sense to have some money sooner than later. Matt Gain is, Olá, Matt. Hi, Matt and Adrian. I started work with Vitória last week on my retirement visa paperwork. She's a pleasure to work with. Obrigado. Glad to hear, Matt. Glad to hear. Yes, and nowadays, most people, they understand. I don't typically handle the procedures. We have many clients, but when you look at our reviews, right? Like when you go to our offices and you look at the reviews, most of the reviews, they are about our team members, and Victoria, she's right there at the top. As a top performer, she takes good care of our clients, and she works, from her heart. And she's been with us for several years now. I mean, Victoria is such a professional resource we have over here, Matt. So you are in good hands. And listen, feel free to, come share about your developments and asking questions, right? Because there are sometimes things that go beyond the scope of what our team members are doing for your application. So there is nothing wrong with you coming and asking more questions about the journey. Okay, no problem with that. I appreciate the sharing, Matt and Adrian. Aaron, my quick math for the business route, 2 programmers by 5 years plus admin fees was more expensive than buying a 1 million property without the labor law risk. Yes, Aaron, that's absolutely the case. I agree 100%. Okay, and typically the property route is so much cleaner, right? It's so much cleaner from different perspectives. So that's actually our understanding here. Now, listen, every now and then we do have like a business investment case, but this is going to be typically for very specific candidates. Like we have a meeting with this candidate in a Zoom call, and we can tell the residency is secondary, right? Like, so they really have this business plan. They already have, business partners lined up. These are, reasonably trustworthy business partners in Brazil, right? So, you see that they are tackling this thing from the right angle. Now, whenever we see people coming just for the residency, like we shy away because we know that this is typically a disaster in the make. And guess what? When disaster strikes, many people, like some people, they take responsibility, but other people, they do not. Like they're going to try to find a scapegoat. And guess who's going to be the scapegoat for their disaster? Well, it was the lawyer, right? We hired a lawyer for that, right? So guess what? To avoid this type of circumstance, we shy away of this route. And by the way, we do have clients who come from this route to the real estate. So I remember a couple of clients who got the residency through investment in a business. Not surprisingly, a couple of years down the line, and guess what? The business went bankrupt. They lost their money. They knew the residency was it wasn't going to be renewed whenever they would need to renew, and they had to start from the scratch with the real estate investment route, right? So yeah, just sharing here, and again, that's our take. Different firms, different interpretations. That's our take on the business investment route. All right. Edie Hans, you recently had a video on money transfer taxes. If you do those with Wise, Resolute, Remitly apps, will they take care of that? Or do you need to pay this tax separately? Edie Hans, so, for Wise, I'm not familiar with Resolute and Remitly, even though they're pretty famous, right? Like I'm gonna grant that, like they are used by the expat community often. I'm familiar with Wise, and Wise they are like, if you access right now, there is a portal from the Brazilian Central Bank in which they specify each and every institution authorized to exchange currency into Brazilian reais, okay? And Wise, guess what? Wise is right there. So Wise is authorized by the Brazilian Central Bank to operate in Brazil, and therefore, when they are operating, I am 99% sure that yes, they are gonna collect the tax, and the tax we're talking over here. Edie, is the IOF. IOF means like, a tax over financial transactions. And listen, the tax is actually low, is 0.38%, so less than half a percent point. But this is for you to bring money into Brazil. Guess what? When you take money out of Brazil, there is a higher exit price tag, and as of today, and this thing has been changing often, right? So you never know how this is going to be in the future, and this has a connection to the interest rate talk I shared with you guys a little bit a few minutes ago. And nowadays the exit tax is 3.5%. Right, which starts to become meaningful, right? And listen, nobody knows, who's going to be in power in the next administration. Maybe they are going to decide that they are going to have a 10% tax exit, and if that happens, the whole idea of getting interest in Brazil to maybe repatriate this money down the line starts to make less sense, right? And you never know what's going to happen, okay? But interesting question, Edie. Yes, there is there is this tax on money entering the country, leaving the country, staying in the country, and to be honest, taxation is a heavy hammer, not only in Brazil but in the United States as well, right? Like United States, Europe, Brazil. Like when you compare, they have different ways of getting your money, of taking your money, but they are not that different, right? I think the big difference, like from our perspective as Brazilians, is that you typically get much more out of your, taxes in the United States and Europe than you get in Brazil, unfortunately. Okay, so tax brackets, paying a lot of taxes. This is just part of life, right? I get it. I have no problem with that. The problem I have as a Brazilian is that what we get in exchange of the money we pay in taxes is not nearly as much as you would get elsewhere, right? And in my opinion, right, the main reason for that is corruption. Okay, you know, Brazilians in general, they're very smart, extremely smart. You know, Brazilian politicians as smart as other categories, right? But maybe too smart for their own good. And you know, like you know, corruption is just pervasive. It's just pervasive. When you look at places like Rio de Janeiro, unfortunately, I love Rio de Janeiro, right? Like, I mean, Rio de Janeiro, and by the way, for those of you who don't know, like my preferred places in Brazil, and it's just maybe because of, you know, business and my life that I developed. I spend more time in Rio de Janeiro and Fortaleza than elsewhere, right? And unfortunately for Rio de Janeiro, there is a horrible tradition of corruption, and you can tell, like, you know, just do a research, open ChatGPT and ask, you know, out of the last 10 governors in Rio de Janeiro, how many of them went to jail? And believe it or not, the vast majority, I don't know if 7 at this time, they went to jail for corruption, right? Like, I mean, corruption that got to the point of being pretty much undeniable from the judicial system, and they went to jail. And you know, like, these are just the governors, right? Like, I mean, what you say about the daily life, right? Like, I mean, when you're gonna do things, when you interact with a police officer, when you interact with someone who's like an inspector in terms of, you know, making sure that you're doing the right thing in your business. I mean, all of those infrastructure, guess what, is kind of impacted by this cultural challenge we have in Brazil. So, you know, like, you know, money paid in taxes in Brazil is potentially as much as you would have in the United States across different types of taxation vectors, right? But, you know, like, we don't feel as Brazilians that we are getting what we should. And unfortunately, you know, much of this money, I don't know percentage wise, maybe there are studies to this effect, but a lot of money is basically just lost in corruption. Okay, so these are the challenges of a developing country. Brazil has so many upsides, but I guess some of the downsides, they are undeniable, and we are not here to sugarcoat the reality. Aaron, I need the labor anyway, so the cost would be offset by I had to spend the money somewhere, but hiring Brazilians doesn't seem favorable. Price is cool, loss. I agree, Aaron. I entirely agree. I entirely agree. Listen, we are in Brazil. You know, like, I mean, I think we use one a developer through Upwork. He's a very, you know, young gentleman out of the northeast of Brazil, and he's, you know, he's a genius. And we use through Upwork because Upwork is gonna, you know, is gonna shield us from all this craziness in terms of labor framework, right? So we use Upwork for this young gentleman we use in the Northeast, and then we have a major developer that work more often with us out of Armenia, right? Like in Europe, and we have like a project manager slash IT guy in the Philippines, right? So we have 3 people working for us on the technology side. Okay, one out of Armenia, one out of Philippines, and one out of the northeast of Brazil, right? Like, and I mean, if it was an opportunity, right, we wouldn't be outsourcing work to Armenia, and the Philippines, and we just do that because it makes sense. Financially, we really enjoy working with people from the Philippines. this gentleman from Armenia. He's extremely reliable, and we love working with these people. All right, it looks like we are out of time, but I want to say thank you to all of you for your participation. Very interesting questions today. I really get excited when you guys bring me such interesting questions. Remember, our next live stream is going to be 7 days from today. So I guess that would make April the 15th plus 7. It means April the 22nd, which should be next Wednesday. The same time, all right? And I hope to see you again. And wishing you all a blessed